Yeah, so my name is Dave Ripplinger, Bioenergy, Bioeconomics Specialist with NDSU Extension. Um, Working in a rather exciting space right now. A lot going on in biofuels and related issues related to carbon. I'm going to give a bit of an update. I gave a talk similar to this last year, and there's been a few developments, but really the same drivers are impacting the canola market as they were a year ago, and really we're just in this continuation. Some of this touches a bit on what Frayne mentioned in the previous talk. But really, what we're seeing in the last few years, an increased demand for biofuels resulting from policy, primarily the state of California and now the nation of Canada. Uh, this has led to an increase in demand for vegetable oil, which we saw in a run-up of oil prices, vegetable oil prices over the last few years. We've seen a bit of a reduction in that more recently. And then finally, we're seeing this expansion in oilseed crush and then biofuel refining. And again, Frayne mentioned this too. So we're seeing this both in soybeans as well as canola. But the interest here is canola, and there really is quite an important story to tell. I'm not going to dive too much into the interplay between the U.S. and Canadian canola oil, and biofuel markets, but it's going to be an interesting few years as that develops. Going back to square one, for those of you who are not familiar, just reintroducing a biofuel referred to as renewable diesel. This is the biofuel of the moment. Has gained a lot of attention, a foothold because of policy and how it fits within the existing petroleum marketing system. So renewable diesel is a biofuel. It's made with vegetable oil, fat, or grease, so animal fats or grease. It's made by hydrotreating, which is a relatively complex, expensive method technique. But what's important about renewable diesel, which distinguishes it from biodiesel, is that it's a drop-in fuel. So it does meet the diesel spec. You don't have to segregate it in the supply chain or in the engine for the most part, because it really is diesel. So again, the same pipe, the same tank, the same engine. You can use it as diesel because it is diesel. And again, this opens up a lot of opportunities and reduces a lot of the costs associated with keeping biodiesel separate and only using at certain rates on vehicle. So again, it's not biodiesel. These are different products. If you refer to biodiesel as renewable diesel or vice versa, you're making a mistake. Biodiesel is a biofuel, but it's not a drop-in. We know this. There's limits in blends. Difference in characteristics. A lot of that is its behavior at certain temperatures, how it starts, and how it works. Really simple process to make. We have a tremendous amount of biodiesel capacity and production in the United States, but that's kind of the chapter one. Now chapter two is renewable diesel. Also talking to why there's this market for renewable diesel. I'm going to start here on the California side. California has a policy that incentivizes low carbon fuels, and renewable diesel really has hit the mark within that space, meeting that policy driven demand, that meeting those demands of that regulatory market as it's referred to. I'll speak about Canada just briefly in terms of their specific policy, but it's actually really similar to California's in intent and design. And the expectation is it will provide a similar opportunity for renewable diesel in that nation as it does in the state of California. Slide I often show just to communicate that this is very much a real product, a real thing. This is a picture from a gas pump in Orange County, California, where you can see on the right-hand side common gasoline blends, which may look familiar except for the price, and then a product on the left, which is a Chevron product, renewable biodiesel B20. So that's 80% renewable diesel, 20% biodiesel, 100% biomass-based diesel. And again, the idea is to push this out or make this product available to consumers to get it to be used to allow compliance with that low carbon fuel standard that they have. And if we look at what's happened recently, this chart using data from the California Air Resources Board shows that dramatic increase in renewable diesel use. And so that's that orange line. And if you can see, about a year ago, we actually are entered this new phase where more renewable diesel is used than diesel itself. So this is statewide. They happen to be quarterly numbers, but that first a year ago is very significant. And then also, if you look at the trajectory, it's continuing to grow in use to meet those ever stricter demands of the state of California. Also, if we look at biodiesel, it's remained in the blend to some extent. Hasn't seen much of a shift in terms of use, because it still does have a nice place if you can, get it to market, as the case is. Important to note too, the size of the California market. California's transportation fuel market is about 10% of the U.S. fuel market. So right now in California alone, they're basically making renewable diesel, biodiesel, the national blend rate in excess of 5%. I mean, that's really quite tremendous when you think about it, especially with that continued upward trajectory. Some quick notes there too. So we had that first change. Interesting too, and this is just through the third quarter of last year, we did see diesel rise in terms of use, and then biodiesel remaining flat. Next chart is the feedstocks that are used just for renewable diesel. So again, this is not biodiesel, just renewable diesel. And if we look at what's being used to date, it's not canola, which is understandable. It was just recently approved as a pathway and has a place already in the biodiesel market and really hasn't moved into renewable diesel yet. But that's also the same thing for soy. So if we look at soybean oil, you can see that it's only been used as a feedstock for renewable diesel for a little over 2 years, almost 3 years now that it's been used at all. And so there's really this future ahead of us where we're expecting to see significant increases in renewable diesel use, and then soybean oil and canola oil use for those products. And again, we're talking here specifically about California, and then we have the Canadian case as well. Now, looking more broadly at the feedstocks used, for biomass-based diesel completely. So this is both renewable diesel and biodiesel. We can see soybean oil dominates, but canola oil is still there. Again, canola oil has a very important role, primarily as a food ingredient, is a high-value food ingredient, but also helps meet some of those requirements for biofuel feedstock, which has been somewhat stable. The expectation now, of course, is that it is going to increase tremendously. But that's where it fits today. Again, all of that is going into biodiesel, but that's going to start changing relatively quickly. Also important to note, so not to get too much into the details about the state of California's policy, but they recently announced in late fall that they're interested in increasing the target, that is increasing the amount to be reduced of the average carbon footprint of fuel used in California. And it's tremendous if you think about this. So a 50% target increase could be met in a variety of ways, but it could include using more biofuel, or using more biofuel with a lower carbon footprint. And, renewable diesel hits on both of those. From my perspective, this is really being driven by the success of renewable diesel in helping California meet those goals, and the renewable diesel industry in building out and showing that it can bring relatively affordable biofuels to market, to cause this proposed change. And again, too, it's important to note that would be by 2030. So it's not just that it's going to change over however many years, it's going to change halfway through the life of this original policy, meaning there'd be a substantial increase in the use of biofuels or otherwise meeting the requirements of the policy. Following up on this is a chart from the Energy Information Administration. A lot of folks are looking at capacity here in the United States as well as elsewhere in the world. This chart is actually pretty recent, even though it doesn't have the final numbers for 2023. But if you can just see that significant growth, and this is measured in thousands of barrels per day. We typically think about gallons, but we're really looking at about 6 billion gallons of capacity within the next 2 years, which is a substantial amount of capacity. with the expectation that that market is there, that market for use is there. And then also I have as my small note the Canadian market with their clean fuel regulation CFR. There's this build out of renewable diesel capacity going there in tandem with the canola oil crush that Frayne spoke about. And they're looking about 1 billion gallons of capacity being brought online. And in fact, they just had a facility in an Atlantic province commissioned in the last couple of weeks. So it's not just canola oil, but primarily canola oil is going to meet that, expected to meet that need. Here's just some quick math so you can see how the scale of this. And we oftentimes forget, how impactful corn ethanol has been and is, and soybean oil biodiesel has been and is. But just to look at what these numbers mean in terms of canola. So this is kind of back to the envelope, a bit of rounding. But if I have 1 billion gallons of renewable diesel to be produced, and again, this is essentially what Canada is going to be adding, they need about 8 billion pounds of vegetable oil, which would be about 8 million acres of canola. I mean, it's a tremendous amount of material to meet those needs. And really the expectation is kind of like it is here in the United States. Are we going to see very little canola leave Canada? I know Frayne alluded to that. Where are you going to get this material from? I don't see how it doesn't come from exports, but they're going to have to bid against that within this renewable diesel market. Also knowing that there's going to be other sources of renewable diesel coming online, as well as the ability to import from the United States. But just to give you an idea of the scale, and again, one of the advantages canola has over soybean is that it really is an oil seed. It has a significantly larger amount of oil per pound than soybean does. And so that being true, even with that, you still need a tremendous amount of production to meet the needs of the energy industry. The chart that Frayne had, and just to kind of follow up on that, he used these same numbers. So we're looking at crush to increase about 50%. All of these facilities, interesting, are right around Regina. That's obviously the sweet spot for this opportunity. I don't have a map today of the renewable diesel refineries. There's a few spread throughout Western Canada. But if we look to it, what they're going to build out to, they're going to have about 18 million metric tons of crush, which if you go back to Frayne's numbers from Stats Canada, that's pretty much what Canadian production has been the last few years. And thinking about why these are being built, the expectation would be they're being built to be used. And so it brings this question of how much more production can Canada and the United States bring online? And, how much of that is going to be crushed and not exported from North America to other buyers? Really significant implications for the industry right now. One of the last things I just want to note, it is related to some extent. I think that all of the producers online and pretty much everybody online should be aware that we're really now entering a new period of agriculture where farm level greenhouse gas emissions are of importance, if not critical importance. This is the space in which I work and have worked for over a decade. And we really seem to have, in the last even just few months, passed this tipping point where farm level emissions are something that farmers need to be cognizant of. And really the quote that I received, I've heard it before, from someone who works in this space, is we really need to think about measuring this, or having some idea, for farmers to have some idea what their emissions are, because if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And right now there are market opportunities, which is fantastic. Some of them are more appealing than others, but there's also a coming wave of regulation that is eventually going to impact farm level emissions. And it's just something for everybody to have on their radar. It is related to biofuels because biofuels, the biofuel industry, biofuel policy is really driven by those farm level emissions, but it's actually a comment for all of agriculture generally, because we really have entered this new phase.